The first thing I noticed that morning wasn't the sunlight spilling across the tiles, or the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. It was a single strand of hair, long, pale, and glinting like a guilty thread in the shower drain. Too fine to belong to me, too long to belong to anyone in this house. I stood there for a full minute, toothbrush idle in hand, staring at it the way you'd stare at a spider that might still move. My husband Elliot always said I overanalyze things. You turn dust into drama, he liked to joke, which was rich coming from a man who once held a 3-hour meeting over the placement of a light fixture. I told myself it was probably Ruth's, my sister's. She had stayed over last weekend after another breakup with her spiritual boyfriend, the one who sold herbal toothpaste and believed rent was an illusion. Ruth shed hair like a golden retriever, but still, something about this one felt deliberate, like evidence left behind by a polite criminal. I plucked it out of the drain and rolled it between my fingers. My hair is dark brown. June's, our daughter's, is the color of maple syrup. Liam's, our son's, is nearly black. Elliot's is chestnut and thinning at the crown, though he denies it with the confidence of a man who owns more mirrors than sense. So whose was this? That question followed me through breakfast, through packing school lunches, through pretending not to watch Elliot scroll through his phone at the counter while claiming to read the news. He smiled at something on the screen, just a small twitch of the lips, the kind of smile that doesn't belong to headlines. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked up quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, just checking an email from the office. Jonas wants me to review the new client deck." Jonas Fry, Elliot's boss, owner of the boutique architecture firm that made minimalist sound like a religion. I nodded. You and Jonas, always changing the world, one deck at a time. He didn't hear the undertone. He never does. By evening, the hair still lived rent-free in my mind. Elliot was snoring beside me, an open book face down on his chest. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about all the ways suspicion sneaks in. It doesn't knock, it just sits down beside you and starts talking. Eventually, I gave up on sleep. I slid out of bed, careful not to wake him, and reached for his phone on the nightstand. I told myself it was a ridiculous thing to do. Only insecure people check their partner's phones. People who don't trust. People who already know. The code was the same as always, his birthday. Elliot isn't imaginative when it comes to passwords or apologies. Messages scrolled by in neat bubbles, work threads, group chats, an occasional meme from Jonas. Then one conversation caught my eye, initials only. FL. The messages began 3 months ago, late at night. The tone was professional at first, then not. "Your presentation saved the meeting today," FL had written. "Couldn't have done it without your charm offensive," Elliot replied. Charm offensive. That was his phrase for flirting with a purpose. I'd heard him use it on clients, waiters, baristas. Now, apparently, on FL. The thread evolved like time-lapse decay, jokes, compliments, hearts. A picture, her arm, a glimmer of blonde hair catching the light, a bracelet I'd seen before. I froze. I'd shaken that bracelet's hand at the firm's holiday party. Faye Laurent, the office manager, efficient, immaculate, terrifyingly poised. Elliot once called her the firm's oxygen. I scrolled faster. More hearts, more emojis. One message. I can't stop thinking about this weekend. My stomach folded in on itself. I locked the phone and stared at the dark screen. My reflection looked calm, which was disorienting. Maybe that's what long marriages do. They train your face to lie politely while your mind unravels furniture. I didn't wake him. I didn't scream or throw the phone. Instead, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would observe, not react. Observation, after all, is what I do for a living. I'm an interior decorator. My job is to notice what doesn't fit. By morning, my plan had taken shape. While Elliot showered and hummed, He always hums like the world is his soundtrack. I packed lunches and poured coffee. He came into the kitchen towel drying his hair, all crisp confidence again. "You seen my gym bag?" he asked. "By the door," I said. "You heading out before work?" "Yeah. Faye wants us to look over the new office layout before Jonas gets in. She's driving the presentation today." The name stung in the air. I smiled anyway. "Tell her good luck." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. He kissed the top of my head in that distracted, managerial way he has, then left the room. I waited until the front door clicked shut. Then I opened his gym bag. Inside, towel, sneakers, his designer toiletries. Among them, a gold-capped bottle of luxury shampoo. I remembered the scent from the bathroom, the citrus lily one I'd dismissed as Ruth's. So it was his now, or hers, shared through him. I unscrewed the cap and poured it into a spare bowl. From under the sink, I pulled an old bottle of depilatory cream I'd once bought by mistake. I filled the gold bottle carefully, matching the consistency and color until it looked identical. I even wiped the cap with a tissue, making sure no fingerprints betrayed the trade. When I was done, I set the bag back by the door and made myself a second cup of coffee. The air smelled like toasted bread and quiet vengeance. He came down 10 minutes later, kissed the kids goodbye, and left. The next half hour passed peacefully, the house filled with ordinary sounds, the refrigerator hum, the clink of spoons, the faint rush of wind through the curtains. I began to feel almost normal again, folding dish towels, thinking about paint palettes for a client's kitchen. Then it came, a shout from upstairs, sharp and startled. The kind of sound you make when your morning routine decides to rewrite itself. Liam looked up from his cereal. "What was that?" "Your father discovering new experiences," I said. Elliot stumbled into the kitchen, a towel clutched around his waist, his expression somewhere between disbelief and outrage. A faint smell of citrus followed him, mixed with something acrid. "What's wrong?" I asked sweetly. "That shampoo burned," he said, rubbing his scalp. "What did you do to it?" "Me?" I widened my eyes. "You're the one using experimental hair products. Maybe it expired." He frowned, checking his reflection in the microwave door. The hairline looked altered. Not catastrophic, but enough to provoke panic in a man who valued aesthetics above ethics. "I have a meeting with Jonas in an hour," he muttered. "And Faye, she'll notice." "I'm sure she will," I said, sipping coffee. He looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, turning toward the sink. "Just that some things are more noticeable than others." He left in a hurry, wearing a baseball cap like a disguise. The door slammed, and for a moment, the house felt suspended in a perfect echoing pause. By mid-morning, I had settled at my desk to finish client mood boards when my phone buzzed. It was Talia, my friend from college, and the only person who could read between my silences. "You okay?" she asked immediately. "I found a hair," I said. "From a human or an animal?" "Questionable." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "Elliot?" "Maybe." "You want me to look into something?" "Talia works for a law firm downtown. She doesn't advertise what she can find, but she's very good at finding it." "Not yet," I said. "I'm collecting data." "Be careful. You always start with jokes and end with plans." "I'm already in the middle." We hung up. I returned to my laptop. I should have focused on work, fabric swatches, color schemes, people who trusted me to make their homes look calm and perfect. But all I could picture was Faye Laurent, immaculate, confident, running her fingers through a head of hair that wasn't entirely hers anymore. By noon, the internet confirmed what my instincts suspected. Faye's social media, usually a curated gallery of elegance, had a new post. A mirror selfie. Oversized sunglasses. Caption: "New look, new start. Some lessons burn more than others." The comment section was a storm of sympathy and speculation. One follower asked, "What happened?" Faye replied, "Sabotage. Some people can't handle competition." I couldn't stop smiling, not because of cruelty, though perhaps a hint, but because of symmetry. Actions have consequences, and some of them smell faintly of lilies. That night, when I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I leaned close and whispered, "You noticed too late." The mirror didn't answer, of course. It rarely does. If you've ever lived with someone who thrives on attention, you know the quiet after their humiliation is almost theatrical. Elliot didn't speak to me for 2 days. Not that he suspected me directly. His pride wouldn't let him. He blamed product tampering, supply chain errors, and at one point, sabotage at the gym. I didn't offer alternatives. Silence is underrated as a form of punctuation. By Thursday, his charm had started to crack. He stood at the kitchen counter, pacing in front of his tablet, muttering at an email from Jonas. "Jonas thinks I mishandled the client launch," he said, though mostly to himself. "Apparently, someone leaked interior drafts. It's absurd. Faye would never—" He stopped mid-sentence. "Would never what?" I asked, flipping pancakes for the kids. "Never act unprofessionally," he said, and that pause told me everything. Faye hadn't returned to work since her sabotage. The firm's whispers were loud enough to reach even our quiet suburb. Elliot had spent the last 48 hours trying to repair both his scalp and his reputation. I passed Liam his plate. "Maybe Jonas just wants to make sure you're focused." "I am focused," Elliot snapped, too sharp for breakfast. "I just need everyone to stop treating me like I caused this mess." He stormed off to shower. The door shut behind him, and I flipped another pancake, thinking, people often say, "this mess," as if it appeared by magic. In truth, most messes are homegrown. That afternoon, while Elliot played damage control, I made my own moves. I logged into our joint bank account. 2 clicks later, the screen confirmed what I suspected. Elliot had been siphoning small amounts into a separate account labeled Business Overflow, a transparent euphemism if I'd ever seen one. I called the bank. "Yes, I'd like to freeze joint transactions temporarily," I said, in the same tone I used to order curtains. "May I ask why, Mrs. Kellen?" "Precaution," I replied, "just until we review recent activity." It's remarkable how polite bureaucracy can be when you sound calm and certain. After hanging up, I transferred my share into a trust I'd quietly set up under the kids' names months ago, partly for college, partly because intuition has its own financial plan. Then I listed Elliot's beloved sports car online. It sold within hours to a collector who appreciated vintage craftsmanship. Elliot wouldn't notice the transfer until next week. By then, the mortgage would be fully paid, and my lawyer, secured through Talia's firm, would have her retainer. When Elliot came home that evening, his mood had improved artificially. He greeted me with a glass of wine, the peace offering of a man rehearsing normalcy. "Jonas was tense but manageable," he said. "We'll recover. These things happen." "Do they?" I asked, swirling my glass. "Of course. Office rumors, petty jealousy, someone trying to climb the ladder. Faye's overreacting online. She'll settle down once she realizes I'm not the villain." I smiled faintly. It must be comforting to always have a narrative ready. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that you're good at improvisation," I said, setting my glass down. He narrowed his eyes, then changed the subject. "Your sister called. She wants to come by tomorrow. Says she's worried about you." Ruth Calder, professional empath and part-time chaos enthusiast. I hadn't told her anything, but she always had a way of sniffing out tension like a truffle pig. "She's probably just bored," I said. Still, Ruth arrived the next morning armed with pastries and sympathy. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "You look tired." "Interior design is a battlefield," I said. She perched at the counter, examining me with her usual blend of affection and calculation. Elliot seems distracted. Trouble at work? Possibly. I saw something about that blonde assistant. What's her name? Faye. Ruth nodded. Right, people say she's unstable. Those types always are. She's an office manager, not a type, I replied. Ruth smiled sweetly, taking a bite of her croissant. Still, I'd keep an eye on him. Men under pressure do strange things. Don't I know it? Her eyes flickered with interest. So you do know something. Nothing worth repeating, I said, but Ruth wasn't satisfied. She lingered, offering advice disguised as sisterly concern, until I finally excused myself for a client call. From the hallway, I heard her humming, one of those self-satisfied little tunes people use when they think they've gained ground. That night, over dinner, Elliot announced that he'd been invited to a client reception next week. Jonas needs me to represent the firm, he said. It'll be good exposure. Exposure, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. He didn't catch the irony. He never does until it's too late. After dinner, while he checked emails, I cleared the table slowly, waiting for him to leave his seat. When he did, his thumb drive glinted beside his plate, an oversight I recognized as fate. I pocketed it without hesitation. Later, in my office, I plugged it into my computer. The drive was packed with drafts, financial spreadsheets, and message archives. Faye's name appeared everywhere. Their conversations weren't romantic here. They were strategic. Mentions of private client information, undeclared side deals, even adjustments to budgets Jonas hadn't approved. I copied everything to my own folder, labeled simply notes. Then I closed the laptop and poured another glass of wine. Elliot came in, loosening his tie. What are you working on? Just client proposals, I said, trying to stay ahead. He smiled absently, kissed the top of my head, and went upstairs. When the house was silent again, I printed one document, a particularly revealing thread between Elliot and Faye discussing creative accounting for project expenses. I slipped it into an envelope along with the rest of the drive, wrote Jonas's office address, and sealed it. No note, just a label in neat handwriting, proof of mismanagement. The next morning, I dropped it into the mailbox on my way to a client's house. The envelope made a small, satisfying sound as it slid through the slot, like punctuation on a sentence that had been waiting years to end. By afternoon, Elliot was pacing again. His phone kept buzzing. Jonas wants an emergency meeting tomorrow, he said, running a hand through his recovering hair. He sounds furious. I'm sure you'll charm him, I said. You always do. He looked at me, searching for sincerity. You think so? I do. Because charm, like currency, eventually runs out, and I had just printed the receipt. The invitation arrived in a glossy envelope that smelled faintly of ambition. Jonas Fry Studios, 15th Anniversary Gala. Dress code, contemporary elegance. Which, translated from architectural language, meant look expensive without trying. Elliot was practically giddy when he read it aloud. Jonas is trusting me to host some of the donors. He said it's important for the firm to present unity. Unity, I asked. That's a bold word for people who leak each other's emails. He looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just sounds like your office could use a seminar on teamwork. Elliot ignored the jab. He was too busy rehearsing his speech in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing his hair, adjusting his cufflinks. The man could charm a camera into blinking, but even charm has a shelf life, and his was starting to spoil. Jonas had received my anonymous package 2 weeks earlier. The firm had since entered silent chaos, internal review, accounting audit, communications freeze. Words that meant everyone was pointing fingers, and Elliot's hands were particularly dirty. Still, he was determined to win Jonas back. The gala was his chance to prove he was still the firm's golden child. So, naturally, I decided to attend. He didn't invite me, of course. He told the kids I was taking some time for myself, which made it sound like I'd gone on a spiritual retreat rather than quietly freezing his finances and selling his car. I waited until the day of the gala, then called Talia. "I need an outfit that says graceful vengeance," I told her. She laughed softly. "White. White. Nothing disarms people like purity," she said. "It'll drive them insane." By evening, I stood before my mirror, wearing a white silk dress I hadn't touched since our 10th anniversary, back when Elliot still said things like, "You're the only thing that makes sense." The fabric shimmered under the lamplight. Simple, elegant, sharp enough to wound without touching. I arrived unannounced at the rooftop venue downtown. The city glowed below, glass towers reflecting the sunset like mirrors, trying to remember who they were. The party thrummed with polite laughter and jazz that was too self-aware. I handed my invitation to a woman with an earpiece, who barely glanced before waving me in. Inside, the air smelled like champagne and self-promotion. Jonah stood near the bar, surrounded by sponsors and staff, his smile stretched thin from overuse. When he saw me, his brows lifted in polite confusion. "Mara," he said, recovering quickly. "I didn't realize Elliot's wife was joining us." "Neither did he," I said. "Thought I'd surprise him." Jonas's smile flickered into something that looked almost like respect. "You certainly know how to make an entrance." Elliot saw me moments later. His face froze, half smile, half panic. "You came," he said, approaching with a practiced laugh that fooled no one. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. 15 years deserves a toast." He glanced at my dress. "White? Bold choice." "Isn't that what Faye used to wear?" I asked lightly. The vein in his temple twitched. The room sparkled with people pretending not to gossip. I sipped champagne, drifting through conversations, listening. I caught fragments. "Wow, internal review. Oi, Jonah's furious. Faye's social post last week, deleted, but screenshots everywhere." Apparently, Faye had uploaded a story of herself in a wig, platinum, synthetic, tragic, captioned "starting over again." Rumor said she'd been suspended, maybe fired. Jonas couldn't risk the scandal bleeding further into client accounts. Elliot, ever the survivor, had tried to spin it as workplace politics. He told colleagues Faye had been unstable, obsessed, unprofessional. The story was fragile, but fragile stories can survive if told confidently enough. The band shifted to something slow. Waiters floated by with trays of canapés so small they looked theoretical. Jonas tapped his glass, and the crowd gathered near the center. 15 years of design, integrity, and innovation, he began. "This firm stands because of the people who build it." His voice carried easily. Years of pitching to investors had trained it to sound like marble. Behind him, a screen displayed a slideshow of projects. Steel, light, perfection. Elliot stood beside him, beaming as if redemption had already been granted. Then, during the applause, something happened. Jonas's assistant, a young man with a nervous tie, looked at his phone and paled. His eyes darted to Jonas. He whispered something urgent. Jonas's speech faltered mid-sentence. The screen behind them flickered. A new image appeared. It wasn't architecture. It was Elliot, shirtless, smiling at the camera from what looked like a hotel suite. A second image followed, him and Faye in matching robes, clinking champagne glasses. Then another, her sitting on his lap, laughing, the city skyline behind them. The crowd gasped in unison, like an orchestra hitting the same wrong note. Elliot's smile vanished. What is this?" Jonas turned slowly toward him. The silence stretched, thick as glue. Someone coughed. Then whispers began, multiplying faster than logic. I didn't move. I just watched, glass in hand, as the man who once prided himself on control lost it completely. Jonas's voice was ice. "Is this your idea of integrity, Elliot?" "It's not what it looks like," Elliot said, which is exactly what people say, when it's precisely what it looks like. Phones lifted, screens glowed. The story had already escaped the room. I slipped away toward the restroom. My reflection in the mirror looked serene, almost radiant. Maybe that's what closure looks like, when you realize the truth doesn't need a witness. It only needs good timing. The door creaked open. Faye stood there. Blonde wig, trembling hands, eyes like polished glass. "You," she hissed, "you think this is funny?" "I think it's efficient," I said. "No need for lengthy explanations." "You ruined me." "You ruined yourself," I said, leaning in. "But the shampoo helped." She flinched. "You did that?" I smiled. "You should have checked the label." Her face twisted. "Elliot will figure it out. He always does." "That's his problem," I said. "He figures things out too late." I left her there, standing under the harsh restroom lights, the shine gone from her wig. Back in the main room, chaos had bloomed. Jonas was on the phone, shouting words like PR and damage control. Elliot was trying to explain to a small crowd that the photos were fabricated. It was a masterclass in delusion. I caught a glimpse of Ruth near the bar. She'd arrived halfway through the disaster, drawn to drama like a moth to flame. She slipped an arm around Elliot's shoulders, guiding him toward the exit. Her hand rested on his chest. Gentle, familiar. I knew that hand. It used to reach for my wine glass. They disappeared into the parking lot together. I finished my drink, set the empty glass on the nearest table, and turned toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I heard the murmur of voices behind me, shock, speculation, disbelief. It was the sound of a reputation collapsing. For once, it wasn't mine. When families fall apart, it never happens in one clean break. It's more like a slow leak in a pipe. You don't notice it at first, just a faint sound in the walls, until one morning the paint bubbles and the floor smells like rot. That's how it was with Ruth. My sister didn't betray me in a single act. She eroded me quietly, smiling while she did it. After the gala, the story spread faster than wildfire in suburbia. Someone leaked the hotel photos to an online design blog, which snowballed into gossip columns, then the local paper. The words ethical misconduct and inappropriate relationship sat side by side with Elliot's name. The firm issued a short statement. "We are conducting an internal review." That was public relations code for, "We're finding the exit paperwork." For the first few days, Elliot moved through the house like a man walking through fog. He tried to act busy, long phone calls, fake meetings, new resumes, but you could feel the panic vibrating under his skin. He'd lost his balance and everyone knew it. Ruth showed up that week, as if she'd smelled opportunity in the air. She arrived mid-afternoon, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a box of pastries, so delicate they looked sculpted. "Thought you might need company," she said. "You must be exhausted from all the attention." "Attention isn't new," I said. "Just the reason for it." She gave me a pitying smile. "I saw the pictures, Mara. Everyone did. It's awful." Awful is a strong word. I'd call it overdue. Ruth followed me into the kitchen and placed the pastries on the counter. "You're handling this so calmly. I'd be losing my mind." "That's why I'm not you," I said, setting out plates. "Coffee? Please. 2 sugars, no milk." Some things never change. Ruth has been predictable since we were kids. Soft voice, perfect manners, always framing herself as the reasonable one. When we were little, she'd whisper our secrets to Mum, then cry when I called her a snitch. "I just care," she'd say, as if caring gave her diplomatic immunity. She watched me pour the coffee. "Have you talked to Elliot?" "Briefly. He's doing what he does best, denying gravity." Ruth sighed dramatically. "You know, he's not a bad man." "I didn't say he was bad," I replied. "I said he was unoriginal." She laughed, but it came out nervous. "Still, you've been married a long time. Maybe there's something to salvage." I looked at her over the rim of my mug. "You think I should forgive him?" I think anger burns out, she said gently, and when it does, you'll wish you'd been kinder. Kindness, I said. Interesting word. Do you think he'd have been kind if the situation were reversed? Ruth shifted in her chair. You don't know that. Oh, I do, I said, setting my mug down. Because when I once missed a client meeting to take Liam to the emergency room for a sprained wrist, he lectured me for an hour about responsibility. That was years ago. And he's still the same man, I said. Only now he's unemployed and nervous. Ruth's eyes softened. You can't live on revenge, Mara. It's corrosive. I'm not living on it, I said. I'm building with it. There's a difference. She stared at me, then laughed again, quieter this time. You always were dramatic. Not dramatic, I said. Just observant. Elliot spent the next week alternating between rage and self-pity. He'd sit at his computer, muttering about lawsuits and defamation, then slam the lid shut and pour himself another drink. Faye had vanished, deleted accounts, turned off phone, evaporated like a bad investment. Jonas stopped taking his calls. The firm sent an official termination letter, pending resolution of internal matters. Translation, he was done. I could almost feel sorry for him if I didn't know him so well. But empathy is a resource, and mine had been fully allocated to the children. One morning, Ruth came by again. She claimed she was checking on me, but she'd dressed like someone going on a date, fresh blowout, lipstick, new coat. You've been here a lot lately, I said, as she set a bakery box on the counter again. Should I start paying you a salary? Very funny, she said, smiling. I'm just worried. Elliot called me last night. That stopped me. He called you? Yes, he sounded desperate. He says you've frozen all the accounts. I didn't freeze all of them, I said. Just the ones he was draining. Mara, Ruth said, folding her hands, you can't keep cutting him off. He's still their father. And what would you like me to do? I asked. Hand him the credit card so he can fund his next hotel stay. You're being cruel. I'm being fair, I said. He spent years undermining me with a smile. I'm allowed to set boundaries. She sighed again, that sanctimonious little sound that used to drive me crazy in high school. You've changed, she said softly. You used to be gentle. I used to be naive, I corrected. Different diagnosis. Ruth leaned forward. He still loves you. I couldn't help laughing. Ruth, you saw the pictures. Love isn't always perfect. No, I said. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet with missing entries. Her eyes flickered. You sound rehearsed. I've had practice. Later that night, I found Elliot in the den, staring at his laptop. The room smelled like whiskey and failed ambition. Jonas won't even meet with me, he said without looking up. He thinks I leaked the designs to clients. Me. Didn't you? He glared. You're enjoying this? Not enjoying, I said. Observing. He rubbed his face. Ruth says you're turning vindictive. Oh, she told you that? She told me you're angry, that you want to hurt me. I want accountability, I said. If that hurts, maybe the problem isn't me. Elliot shut the laptop. You've always been so composed. It's unsettling. That's because when I lose my temper, things break. He stood. Are you threatening me? No, I said calmly. Just offering a forecast. He stared at me a moment longer, then walked away. The door slammed behind him, echoing down the hall. I sat there for a while, listening to the quiet. The house had become an echo chamber of half-spoken truths. Liam stayed in his room with headphones. June retreated to her sketchbooks. We were all waiting for something to give. The next day, I found something curious. A small paper bag on the passenger seat of Elliot's car, left half open. Inside was a pregnancy test, unused, still sealed. I stared at it for a long time, then noticed the receipt tucked underneath, purchased by R. Calder. Ruth, I picked it up carefully, like evidence. Why would she buy that for him? Why was it in his car? A dozen theories spun through my head, each worse than the last. That evening, she texted, "Can we talk? It's important." I replied, "Dinner." 7. When she arrived, Elliot was already home, pacing again, phone in hand. Ruth stepped inside, pretending surprise. "Oh, good, you're both here," she said, her tone too bright. "Maybe we can clear the air." "The air's fine," I said. "The company's questionable." She looked between us, then at Elliot. "You didn't tell her?" "Tell me what?" I asked. Elliot rubbed his neck. "Ruth thinks she might be pregnant." The words hung in the air like static. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me," I said. Ruth flushed. "It's not what you think." "Then explain what I should think." She hesitated. "Elliot and we talked a lot these past weeks. He was a mess, Mara. He needed someone to listen." "You listened with your entire body?" I asked. Her face paled. "It just happened." "That's convenient." "Mara, don't," Elliot said sharply. "This isn't helping anyone." I turned to him. "You're defending her." "She didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed. "You both have a real talent for rewriting verbs." Ruth started crying, delicate tears, like she practiced in the mirror. "I never wanted this. I just thought, after everything, you'd understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You wanted what wasn't yours. Same as him." Elliot stepped forward. "Don't make this ugly." "It's already a masterpiece," I said. I went upstairs without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and drafted an email to Talia. "We need to talk about documentation." Then I stared at the ceiling until the patterns in the plaster looked like exit maps. 2 days later, Ruth called. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I think I was mistaken." "Mistaken?" "The test was negative." "You took it?" "Yes, it's over. Please don't tell anyone." "Who would I tell? You've already told half the town by implication." She sighed. "You always make me feel small." "That's because you keep shrinking." But small lies grow fast. A week later, the tabloids picked up a rumor. Architect's affair results in secret pregnancy scandal. The article mentioned both Elliot and Ruth by name. The comments were merciless. Elliot's firm issued another statement, this one shorter. "Mr. Kellen is no longer affiliated with our organization." He stormed into the kitchen holding the printed article. "Did you do this?" he shouted. "Did you leak this to the press?" I looked up from my laptop. "No, but I can admire whoever did. This is ruining my life." "Correction," I said. "It's documenting your choices." He slammed the paper on the counter. "You're enjoying this. Admit it." "I'm enjoying the symmetry," I said. "Everything you tried to hide is now public. It's efficient." He glared, trembling with a kind of anger that had nowhere productive to go. "I lost my job because of you." "No, you lost it because of you," I said evenly. "And because Jonas has a low tolerance for liars." He leaned forward. "You're not blameless, Mara. You think you're so clever, but people talk. Jonas told me he got an anonymous package with proof of my emails. Who else could have sent that?" "Maybe Faye," I said. "She seems vengeful." He narrowed his eyes. "It was you." I shrugged. "Hard to say. Memory's a slippery thing." 2 weeks passed. Then the results arrived, the ones that would end any illusion still left standing. Ruth showed up that morning without calling. She looked exhausted, her usual confidence replaced by something fragile. She carried an envelope, the kind you get from a lab. "I can explain," she said. "Don't bother," I said, gesturing toward the table. "Let's open it together." Elliot came down the stairs at that moment, hair uncombed, eyes wary. "What's going on?" "Your sister-in-law brought mail," I said. "She says it's important." Ruth's hand shook as she broke the seal. She slid the paper out, unfolded it, and froze. I took it gently from her fingers and scanned it. "Paternity test result. Negative." "Well," I said, "congratulations to the mystery father." Ruth's lips parted. "Mara, No," I interrupted. No speeches, just honesty for once. Who's the father? She sank into a chair, eyes wide and unfocused. It doesn't matter now. Oh, it matters, I said, because you walked into my home and told my husband you might be carrying his child. You used that to pull sympathy, to make yourself indispensable. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt you. Intentions don't interest me, I said. Results do. Elliot stood frozen, pale and silent. For once, words had abandoned him. I slid the test results across the table. Guess the hair wasn't the worst part after all. Ruth let out a small, broken laugh. You think you've won? No, I said quietly. I think I've finally stopped losing. That night, after she left, Elliot sat in the living room staring at the dark window. The reflection showed him smaller than he'd ever appeared. You planned all of this, he said. From the moment you found out. I reacted, I said. You're the one who wrote the script. He turned toward me, voice trembling. You could have just left. I could have, I said. But then you'd still believe you were the hero. He looked at me for a long time, then laughed bitterly. You think you're righteous? No, I said, standing. I just think I'm free. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The next morning, the sun rose pale and unbothered. Elliot's suitcase was by the door. He was moving into a short-term rental until things calmed down. The kids hugged him politely. I watched from the doorway. Take care of yourself, I said. He nodded, eyes down. I didn't expect it to end like this. Neither did I said, but endings rarely send invitations. He left without looking back. I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. The house was quiet, honest, almost peaceful. In that stillness, I realized something simple. Revenge hadn't fixed me, but it had rearranged me. And maybe that was enough. You never really know how much paperwork a marriage can produce until you decide to end one. Receipts, insurance policies, joint deeds, tax forms, every sheet of paper a fossil of something that once looked like partnership. My dining table turned into a battlefield of envelopes. The kids avoided it like radiation. Even the cat refused to sit there. The morning I filed, the sky was a perfect, indecent blue. I wore my calmest clothes, grey slacks, navy blazer, minimal makeup. My lawyer, Evelyn Grant, met me outside the courthouse. She was small, precise, and terrifying in the way only lawyers with no wasted motion can be. You ready? She asked. As ready as people get before they start rearranging their lives. Evelyn smiled without humor. Good. Let's start with control. You'll need to act like you already have it. Inside, the building smelled of disinfectant and bureaucracy. I signed my name so many times it stopped looking like a word. Petition for dissolution. Request for custody. Financial disclosure. Each line another nail in the architecture of what used to be us. Elliot hadn't hired counsel yet. He still believed he could negotiate with charm. That was his first mistake. By the time the papers were served, he called me 3 times and left a voice message that began politely and ended somewhere near panic. Mara, this is insane. We can fix this. Lawyers will make everything worse. Think about the kids. Let's talk, please. I saved the recording. Every word of it sounded like a blueprint for denial. Talia came by that evening with takeout and 2 bottles of wine. She looked around the house, now half boxed up, and said, It feels different. It's breathing again, I said. She nodded. You filed. Filed, stamped, and documented. She grinned. You magnificent planner. I poured her a glass. This isn't revenge anymore, it's maintenance. Sure, she said. Maintenance with legal teeth. We clinked glasses. Talia had been working quietly behind the scenes for months, researching accounts, reviewing digital trails. She was a paralegal by title, but her skill set bordered on espionage. She'd shown me how to gather everything without crossing lines. Email copies, transaction logs, communication summaries. All admissible, all real. He'll try to paint you as emotional, she said between bites. That's the standard playbook. Stay calm no matter what. I've practiced calm for 15 years, I said. I'm fluent. Elliot showed up unannounced 2 days later. He still had that easy posture, the one that made people mistake him for reasonable. But his eyes were tired, and the cut of his suit couldn't disguise how brittle he'd become. Can we talk? He asked. Talk, I said. Not negotiate. He followed me to the kitchen. You don't have to do this. I already did. Mara, come on. He gestured helplessly. We built a life together. Correction, we built my life around your schedule. He flinched. You're twisting everything. I'm aligning it. He exhaled, pacing. Do you realize what this looks like? You freezing accounts, sending letters to Jonas. I didn't send anything to Jonas, I lied. Why, did he get something interesting? Elliot stopped pacing. He says someone mailed him proof of mismanagement. Then he should probably thank them for helping the company. His jaw tightened. You're destroying my career. I'm illuminating it, I said. The difference is lighting. The first mediation session felt like theatre. Small conference room, fluorescent lights, neutral carpet. Elliot arrived with a new lawyer, a man named Donnelly, all grin and bravado. Evelyn introduced herself with a handshake that could bend steel. Donnelly started with charm. We're hoping to keep this civil. My client believes reconciliation is possible. Evelyn smiled coolly. My client believes arithmetic is possible. Let's discuss division. The mediator, a grey-haired woman with weary eyes, gestured for calm. Let's start with assets. Elliot leaned forward. The house is marital property. I want it appraised for fair sale. I looked at him. The house you abandoned? The one paid off with money from your overflow account? He blinked. That was for business expenses. I've got the receipts, I said, labeled as hotel consultations. Donnelly cleared his throat. Let's not dramatize. Evelyn opened a folder. We'll provide the documentation. There's also evidence of concealed funds. Elliot turned red. That's ridiculous. Of course, Evelyn said, sliding papers across the table. Ridiculously well documented. The mediator's eyebrows rose as she read. Elliot's lawyer shifted uneasily. My soon-to-be ex looked like a man watching the blueprint collapse on the table in front of him. When we left the building, Evelyn said, He's rattled. Keep it that way. I don't want him destroyed, I said. Just honest. She gave me a look. People like him only tell the truth when cornered. Weeks turned into strategy. Elliot's lawyer filed counterclaims, standard bluster, claiming I'd sabotaged his career, that my emotional behavior caused reputational harm. Evelyn filed responses that made those words look like paper airplanes in a hurricane. Talia came by every other night, reviewing drafts. He's not just fighting for money, she said. He's fighting for his image. I know, I said. He thinks this is branding. Then make the brand expensive, she said. The second mediation session was worse. Elliot arrived angry, defensive. You're trying to humiliate me, he said. I'm trying to raise our kids in a house that doesn't smell like anxiety, I said. He slammed his hand on the table. You froze everything. I can't pay rent. Evelyn didn't flinch. Mr. Kellen, the court can issue temporary support if you'd like. That would require disclosing your real income. He hesitated. I'd rather handle it privately. Of course, she said, smiling faintly. Privacy seems important to you. His lawyer whispered something urgent, but Elliot waved him off. He was unraveling. That's what ego does. It prefers collapse to concession. The mediator tried again. Perhaps a cooling-off period, Elliot sneered. She doesn't need cooling off. She's ice. I prefer precision, I said. He pointed at me. You think you're smarter than everyone. Evelyn placed a hand on my arm, subtle. I stayed silent. Silence can be louder than shouting. He kept going. You tricked me. You planned this entire thing. Evidence of foresight, Evelyn murmured. Admirable quality. The mediator sighed. We'll reconvene with the judge. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and exhaustion. It was smaller than I imagined, almost intimate. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, looked at us as if she'd seen this scene 1,000 times before. Evelyn began with composure. Your Honor, my client seeks dissolution on grounds of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary trust. We have documentation of concealed accounts, inappropriate use of business funds, and communication suggesting manipulation of shared assets. Donnelly objected, muttering something about irrelevant personal grievances. The judge silenced him with a glance. Evelyn handed over exhibits, emails confirming transfers, transaction logs, and communications between Mr. Kellen and a colleague named Fay Laurent, discussing expense adjustments under false project codes. The judge raised an eyebrow. Understood. Elliot shifted in his seat. Those weren't false, just temporary. Temporary deceit, Evelyn corrected. There's a distinction only in grammar. Donnelly leaned forward. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets any bookkeeping errors, but insists these were clerical, not intentional. The judge looked unimpressed. Clerical errors don't usually include hotel receipts. The courtroom chuckled softly. Elliot's lawyer flushed. Evelyn continued, steady as a metronome. Additionally, we'd like to enter testimony from Mr. Jonas Fry, confirming termination for ethical lapses. Jonas himself appeared, immaculate in a charcoal suit. He avoided my eyes but nodded politely to Evelyn. The clerks wore him in. Mr. Fry, Evelyn said, was Mr. Kellen terminated for professional reasons? Yes, Jonas said. After an internal review, we found evidence of compromised conduct and misuse of confidential materials. Elliot shifted again. Jonas, come on. Jonas didn't look at him. I'm here under subpoena. I'm answering truthfully. Elliot's lawyer whispered frantically, but it was too late. The air in the room had thickened into certainty. Evelyn turned to the judge. We rest on documentation and testimony. The judge nodded. Mr. Donnelly, response? He sputtered through a summary about reconciliation and misunderstanding. Elliot sat rigid, jaw tight, every word carving deeper lines into his face. When it was my turn, the judge asked gently, Mrs. Kellen, what is it you want from this proceeding? I took a breath. Stability, I said. For my children, for myself. I want clarity instead of chaos. That's all. The judge studied me for a long moment. That's refreshingly concise. Elliot's temper finally cracked. You're painting me like a villain, he said. You think this makes you noble? Freezing accounts, setting traps. I met his eyes. I didn't set traps. You built them, and I stopped walking into them. He slammed a hand on the table. You're impossible. Evelyn leaned forward, calm as ever. Please note, Your Honor, this display underscores our concern about emotional volatility. The judge made a note. Duly observed. Elliot tried to speak again, but Donnelly tugged his sleeve. Stop talking, he hissed. The judge tapped her pen. Given the evidence, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mrs. Kellen pending financial review. Joint accounts will remain frozen until audit completion. Mr. Kellen may file for supervised visitation once financial disclosures are complete. Elliot blinked, stunned. What? You can't... Sir, the judge interrupted, you're in no position to dictate terms. You may sit down. He sank back, pale and speechless. The gavel came down softly. Court adjourned. Outside, the sky had turned grey. Reporters weren't waiting. This wasn't celebrity-level scandal, but the parking lot felt charged anyway. Elliot leaned against his car, staring at the asphalt. You ruined me, he said quietly when I passed. I stopped. You ruined yourself. I just kept the receipts. He looked up, eyes raw with something close to bewilderment. You don't even sound angry anymore. I'm not, I said. That's the worst part, isn't it? I got into my car and drove home without music. The world felt strangely balanced. That night, I tucked June into bed. She looked at me seriously. "Is Dad mad at you?" "He's mad at himself," I said. "Are you mad at him?" "Not anymore." She thought about that. "Will he come home?" "No, honey, but he'll still call." She nodded slowly. "Okay." Down the hall, Liam sat at his desk pretending to do homework. "You okay, Mom?" he asked when I peeked in. "I think so." He hesitated. "He messed up, huh?" "Yeah," I said, "but we'll be fine." He gave a small smile. "You always figure things out." "Not always," I said. "Just eventually." When the house was quiet, I poured myself tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd once planned vacations and budgets and birthdays. Now it held stacks of legal documents, a pen, and a cup of something warm. A new kind of domestic stillness. I thought about all the women I'd seen in court that day. Different faces, same story. Each one learning that control is quieter than rage, more deliberate than forgiveness. I wasn't sure what came next. But for the first time, next didn't sound like a threat. I opened my notebook and wrote 2 words. Final move. Because every structure, no matter how elegant, needs a last beam before it stands alone. The morning after the hearing, I woke up to the sound of nothing. No coffee grinder sputtering, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no footsteps in the hallway. Just the soft, familiar silence of a house that finally belonged to me. I made coffee slowly, watching the steam rise from the mug. The kitchen window looked out onto the maple tree Elliot planted years ago, when Liam was still small enough to sit on his shoulders. The tree had grown taller, thicker, unbothered by human drama. Its branches brushed the glass gently, like it was checking in. Still here, still standing. Still standing, I said aloud. Elliot was gone. He'd moved into a short-term rental across town, a corporate apartment with sterile furniture and rent paid directly by his dwindling savings. The judge's decision had landed hard. Temporary custody to me, accounts frozen, financial disclosure due within a month. Jonas had dismissed him officially the same day. Faye's name had vanished from the firm's website. It was as if the universe had finally matched its paperwork to reality. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. June drew pictures of our new start, labeling each room with pastel colors. Liam retreated into music, headphones on, expression calm but inward. When I asked if he missed his father, he said, "I don't know yet." Honest, perfectly age-appropriate. That honesty hurt more than any accusation ever could. Evelyn called mid-morning. "Congratulations," she said, though her voice carried no celebration. "You handled yourself better than 90% of people I represent." "I had practice," I said. "Keep records of everything from here on. He'll either vanish for a while or come back trying to renegotiate. Both are predictable." "What do you think he'll do?" "Both," she said. "They usually do." Elliot's reappearance came sooner than expected. 1 week later, he showed up on the porch in sunglasses and a suit that didn't fit him anymore. He was carrying a manila envelope. "I'm not here to fight," he said before I even opened the door fully. "I just need to talk." I let him in. He stood in the foyer, glancing around like a tourist in a museum of his own mistakes. "I got the final numbers from the accountant," he said, holding out the envelope. "You should see them." I took it but didn't open it. "I trust Evelyn more than your accountant." "Of course you do." He sighed. "Mara, can we not do this? I know I messed up." "Messed up is when you forget an anniversary," I said. "You built a second life inside our first one." He flinched but stayed composed. "I never meant for it to go that far. Faye was—" "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't say her name like she's an excuse." He nodded. "She's gone. You win. This wasn't a competition." "Everything with you was," he said quietly, even silence. For a second, something in me softened. The memory of the man who once danced with me in the kitchen after midnight, barefoot, laughing. But memories are like smoke. If you hold them too long, they burn. What do you want, Elliot? I wanted to see the kids, just for an hour. Supervised visits only, you know the order. He sighed. Right, the order. Always rules, always structure. That's what stability looks like. He hesitated. Do you ever get tired of being right? I get tired of pretending you ever were. He looked at me, defeated. You've changed. I stopped performing, I said. He left without another word. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, the same car he used to take to late meetings that never existed. This time, there was no lie left to drive it. 2 days later, Ruth texted. A new number, same audacity. We both lost him. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. You lost more. No reply. I blocked the number. Closure doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the absence of another notification. Spring rolled forward quietly, the house filled with new routines. Morning coffee, school drop-offs, client calls. My business had survived the chaos surprisingly well. In fact, I'd gained clients through word of mouth. Apparently, the woman who redesigned her own disaster made good branding. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints for a downtown condo renovation, my phone buzzed again. It was Talia. Guess who just got off the phone with a friend at Jonas Fry Studios, she said. Tell me. Elliot tried to pitch himself as a consultant. Jonas turned him down flat. I smiled faintly. Jonas always did have taste. There's more. Faye's gone overseas. Rumor says Lisbon. Some PR job for an architecture magazine. How poetic, I said. The city of facades. Talia laughed softly. You're free, you know. Legally, emotionally, metaphorically. I know, I said. But freedom's noisy. I'm still learning the volume. That night, after the kids went to bed, I took out the deed papers Evelyn had couriered earlier. My name alone on every line. Ownership transferred, finalized, filed. The weight of it settled over me. Not heavy, not light, just solid. I signed the last page, dated it, and set the pen down. Then I walked through the house slowly, touching each wall like a pulse. The living room, where Elliot used to rehearse speeches. The hallway mirror that once reflected two people pretending to share a future. The kitchen, where I had learned patience the way other people learn recipes. Every corner felt both familiar and foreign, like a place I'd renovated without realizing it. At the back door, I paused. Outside, the yard shimmered faintly under the porch light. The maple's branches swayed in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, its headlights gliding over the pavement like a memory on its way out. I whispered, forever ended. The words didn't sting. They just existed, simple, factual, final. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and climbed the stairs to bed. The morning after I signed the deed, sunlight poured across the kitchen table in sharp, clean lines. I made toast, brewed coffee, and checked the clock. It was 7:42 a.m., the exact time Elliot used to walk out the door every weekday, tie perfectly straight, shoes polished, life rehearsed. The space he'd once occupied had turned into air and quiet. June padded in wearing her robe, hair tangled from sleep. You're smiling, she said, surprised. I guess I am. Did something good happen? Everything stopped happening, I said. That's the good part. She poured cereal, humming under her breath, a song she must have learned at school. Liam followed soon after, taller every week, earbuds around his neck. He nodded to me in that teenage way that meant both I love you and please, don't make this weird. It wasn't weird, it was peaceful. After they left for school, I sat at my desk and opened my email. New client inquiries, invoices, updates from Evelyn confirming the final court decree. The subject line read, Final judgment filed, case closed. I opened it and stared at the scanned pages. The marriage was officially over. Custody granted, property granted, support granted, everything in order, everything done. I exhaled slowly, For months, I'd imagined this moment as fireworks, as thunder, as catharsis. Instead, it arrived as stillness. Maybe that's how real closure works. Not a symphony, just the sound of doors clicking shut. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway. I recognized it immediately. Elliot's rental. The grey sedan that looked like anonymity on wheels. He stepped out holding a small box. No sunglasses this time. No suit, just jeans and a plain white shirt. "Last delivery," he said when I opened the door. "What is it?" "My things, the few that were left." He placed the box on the porch. I could see what was inside. A wristwatch I'd given him years ago, a few framed photos, his favorite fountain pen, a small model of the first house he ever designed. The objects looked smaller than I remembered. "I figured you wouldn't want me to come inside," he said. "You figured right." He nodded, shifting awkwardly. "I, got the official papers too." "Good." He hesitated. "You look better, Mara." "I am better." He smiled faintly. "I don't think I ever said thank you." "For what?" "For keeping things together longer than they deserved to be." I studied him. The man who once filled every room now seemed like a ghost of his own habits. "You could have learned to do that yourself." He nodded again. "Maybe someday." He turned to leave, then stopped halfway down the steps. "For what it's worth, I hope you're happy." "I plan to be," I said. He gave a small, genuine smile, something I hadn't seen in years, and got back in the car. He didn't look back. The engine hummed once, twice, then faded down the street. I watched until the road was empty. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like balance. That evening, Talia stopped by with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "To freedom," she said. "To peace," I replied. We sat on the back porch, watching the sky turn orange and gold. The maple tree rustled in the wind, scattering tiny seed pods like confetti. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "And for once, I'm not afraid of the answer." She smiled. "You should write a book. How to dismantle a marriage and still make dinner on time." "I'd need a good editor," I said. "You already have one. Life." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when everything awful has already happened and nothing urgent remains. Later, after Talia left, I sat alone in the living room. The walls glowed softly in the lamplight. The house felt larger, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath for years. On the coffee table sat the deed, folded neatly beside a set of keys. My keys now, only mine. I ran a hand over the smooth surface of the table Elliot had once built himself. He'd been proud of it. The craftsmanship, the symmetry. I remembered watching him sand the corners until they were perfect. Back then, I thought perfection was the same as love. Now I knew it was just control in better lighting. I opened the window, letting in the cool night air. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, then quieted. The house settled into its own rhythm, old wood creaking like it was stretching after a long sleep. I picked up the keys and turned them in my hand. Metal, simple, honest. Every door in this house answered to me now. Every lock, every hinge, every threshold. At midnight, unable to sleep, I wandered through the rooms. June's art projects decorated the hallway. Paper stars, watercolor sunsets, a portrait of our family that still included Elliot but placed him in the background. Liam's room smelled faintly of guitar strings and energy drinks. The laundry room hummed softly, reliable and alive. When I reached the front door, I found myself smiling. The keyring felt warm in my palm from the heat of my skin. I slid one key off, the front door key Elliot used to carry, and set it gently on the entry table. It made a small metallic sound, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. "This house," I said quietly, "belongs to the people who stayed." I turned off the lights one by one until the rooms were wrapped in calm shadow. The next morning, the final mail from the court arrived. Official envelope, government seal. I opened it without hesitation. The decree was brief, almost disappointingly so. Case closed. Property ownership awarded to petitioner. Custody final. That was it. No ceremony, no grand finale. Just ink confirming what I already knew. I folded the letter and slid it into the kitchen drawer beside the warranty manuals and appliance receipts. Real life never stops needing organization. Outside, the sky was bright again. The world kept going. I stood at the doorway with my coffee, watching the street wake up. The neighbor walking her dog, the mail truck rumbling past, the kids down the block racing their bikes. Ordinary life, steady and unremarkable. For the first time, I wanted exactly that, unremarkable. A week later, Jonas called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mara," he said, voice clipped as ever. "I wanted to say congratulations. The firm finalized the settlement with Elliot today." Settlement? He admitted to the mismanagement, signed a non-disclosure, we're clear. "Then you got what you wanted." "Thanks to you," Jonas said. "You didn't just save your home, you saved my firm." "I wasn't trying to save your firm." "I know," he said. "But you did." There was a pause, then his voice softened. "You ever think of coming to work with us? We could use someone who understands design and people." I smiled. "Jonas, I already have a job. It's called living my own life." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Good luck, Mara." "Good luck to you too." When the call ended, I realized something simple. No part of my life was tethered to his anymore. Not Jonas, not Elliot, not even the echo of their praise. I didn't need it. I'd learned to build without permission. That weekend, I took the kids to the coast. It was a small tradition we'd started years ago. 3 days of sand, boardwalk food, and questionable sunscreen. This time, we drove in my own car, the mortgage cleared, my name on the papers in the glove box. Liam played music through the speakers, soft, melodic, nothing angry. June sang along badly. We stopped for ice cream, walked along the shore, watched the gulls dive for crumbs. The ocean stretched out before us, endless, patient. At one point, June took my hand. "Do you miss him?" I thought about it. "Sometimes I miss who I thought he was." "That's not the same, right?" "No," I said. "It's not." Liam threw a pebble into the water and turned back to me. "We're okay now, aren't we?" "Yeah," I said. "We're okay." And I meant it. On our last night there, I sat on the porch of the small rental cabin while the kids slept inside. The ocean's rhythm filled the quiet, steady, unhurried. I pulled out my notebook, the one I used to track every plan, every strategy, every contingency. The pages were nearly full. On the final line I wrote, kept the house, kept my peace, kept the punchline. Then I closed it, set it aside, and watched the waves move like slow applause. The stars above the horizon shimmered faintly. The tide came in and went out, erasing every footprint we'd left behind that day. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to look back at the shore to see what was lost, because I finally understood. Nothing was lost. I had simply traded noise for quiet, illusion for truth, and companionship for freedom. And I liked the exchange.